Carlos found Jill, half conscious on the ruined streets, her skin fever warm and her breath shallow. With no time to lose, he carried her to the burning outskirts of Raccoon City, heading towards the only place he believed might still hold a cure, Spencer Memorial Hospital. As he ran, he radioed Terrell, telling him to rendezvous there. The signal crackled in and out, but the message was clear enough. By 9:20 p.m., Carlos reached the hospital. Inside, the once sterile halls were smeared with blood, overturned gurneys, and a band of medical charts. He laid Jill on the bed in a makeshift sick room, little more than an empty storage nook. He needed a vaccine. Carlos followed a trail of research notes and security protocols until he reached the sealed office of Nathaniel Bard, Umbrella's chief virologist. To gain entry, he searched through the surrounding rooms, eventually recovering a tape player and an audio tape key to Bard's voice. Bard berated a young nurse when she questioned the classified documents scattered throughout his office, his arrogance dripping through every dismissive insult and odor, revealing a man who believed himself untouchable. When Carlos finally unlocked the door and pushed his way inside, the office was silent. Bard lay slumped over his desk, a pool of dry blood beneath him. A single gunshot wound marked his death. Whatever he had been, tyrant, genius, coward, Nikolai had ended him before answers could be extracted. But Bard had left something behind. Carlos found a terminal still powered, displaying a file marked September 29th, 11 p.m. He played it. On screen, Bard appeared shaken. He confessed everything. The outbreak tearing Raccoon City apart was no accident, but the release of a biological weapon, the T-virus, engineered by Umbrella. Bard's team had been ordered to create a vaccine, only for Umbrella's board to demand its destruction, to protect his corporation from exposure. Bard admitted he had smuggled one remaining sample into his office, and then, mid-sentence, he had heard something outside the door. The recording ended. Carlos stood silent. Carlos retrieved the lone vial of the vaccine and raced back to the makeshift sick room. He injected Jill with the serum, watching helplessly as her fever raged on. It was all he could do. Terrell arrived minutes later. He switched on a nearby television, revealing an emergency broadcast dated September 30th. The government had declared Raccoon City's contagion uncontainable. On October 1st, a missile strike would erase the city, and everyone left within it. Outside, the dead were gathering. The hospital's defenses were collapsing as waves of zombies swarmed towards the building. Carlos took up position at the entrance, buying Terrell the time he needed to hack the hospital's security system and seal the shutters. But the horde broke through before the lockdown was complete, pouring into the lobby in an avalanche of clawing hands and gaping jaws. When the line threatened to break, Carlos rigged a C4 charge to a pillar and detonated it, sending concrete crashing down to block the front door. The screams of the dead were momentarily muffled. Carlos sprinted back upstairs. He told Terrell to contact anyone, any government office still operating, and to try to stall the missile strike. Jill jolted awake to the dim glow of the bedside lamp. The television nearby flickered with an emergency broadcast. October 1st, 12 a.m. Just hours remained before the U.S. government would annihilate Raccoon City. Jill pushed herself to her feet and left the room. She found Terrell in a nearby corridor, still hunched over a radio console, trying desperately to reach anyone with the authority to halt the missile strike. He told her that Carlos had gone underground, following rumors of a final stockpile of the vaccine, enough to give the city a chance if they could retrieve it in time. Jill didn't hesitate. She headed into the darkened hospital halls and soon discovered a hidden service elevator that sank deep beneath the building. What waited below was no simple basement. It was an entrance to a sprawling underground complex, another secret branch of Umbrella's illicit empire. Inside, she spotted Nikolai, observing her from an elevated walkway. The moment she shouted his name, he vanished into the shadows, slipping deeper into the facility. Jill chased after him. Minutes later, Jill regrouped with Terrell, who had finally made contact with someone high enough in the chain of command. The message was clear: deliver the vaccine, and they would consider calling off the strike. Relief flickered at Jill's chest, but it didn't last. A thunderous crash shook the chamber as the mutated creature called Nemesis. Tentacles lashed out with the impossible speed. One struck Terrell, lifting him off the ground like a rag doll. Terrell's voice broke through the chaos, urging Jill to run, to finish what they started. His final breath left him as the creature hurled his body outside. Jill sprinted through the corridors, slamming a reinforced bulkhead shut, just as the monster slammed into it from the other side. She didn't stop until she reached a heavily marked door, Nest 2. There, Jill retrieved all necessary components to synthesize a vaccine. Once the vaccine was finished, Jill reached for the vial, and the room went dark. The creature was here again, and this time it was not going to let her escape. Jill fled through the sterile corridors of the facility. The screeching howl of the creature now known as Nemesis. The creature had been created by Umbrella to hunt STARS members, and now this very creature was hunting Jill. Every door she sealed, every corner she rounded, seemed to only buy her seconds. Nemesis would not stop. Not now, not ever. At last she burst into the cavernous chamber, marked Disposal Center. A chamber lined with enormous vats, cranes, and industrial solvent tanks. Jill barely had time to take it in before Nemesis crashed through a reinforced bulkhead. The floor buckled beneath their combined weight. Jill lunged for a support beam as the catwalk gave in, catching herself on the lower ledge as debris thundered past her. Her fingers slipped, and the precious vaccine vial tumbled from her grasp. As she pulled herself up, a voice drifted into the chamber, smooth, mocking, and utterly unfazed by the carnage around them. Nikolai. He stood above her in the intact walkway. He proposed a trade. Jill would descend into the pit and fight the Nemesis. Give him the battle footage he needed to sell to Umbrella's rivals. In return, he would give back the vaccine she so desperately needed. The arena below was a massive industrial kill zone, designed to handle hazardous waste, and towering tanks loomed over her like dormant giants. Nemesis awaited her there. Jill used every weapon at her disposal, firing round after round into the monster's heaving frame. Explosive canisters ruptured under her shots, engulfing the creature in bursts of fire and corrosive spray. But Nemesis pressed on, its height thickening. Then between screams, gunfire, and the roar of machinery, another voice cut through the chaos. Carlos. Together they hammered the creature with everything the environment offered, but Nemesis refused to die. The two fought the creature until the creature fell, and the terror that had stalked Jill across Raccoon City was gone. Carlos helped Jill at the disposal center, her breath ragged from the fight. Jill pressed onward, adrenaline still burning through her tired muscles. She entered the wide control chamber, lit by flickering emergency lights, and there stood Nikolai, calmly pocketing the vaccine. He smirked as she aimed her gun at him, demanding he hand it over. He refused, of course. The situation might have escalated to gunfire, but the ground suddenly trembled beneath them. A massive bulk of shifting flesh burst through the chamber wall. Nemesis, reborn again, now reduced to a grotesque, heaving mound of tissue and tentacles. Monstrosity no longer resembling anything close to human or tyrant. Its roar shook the metal around him. Nikolai, unfazed. The data was priceless, he said. Worth millions. He offered Jill a mock salute, wishing her good luck, and sprinted towards the exit. Carlos appeared a heartbeat later. Jill didn't hesitate. She ordered him to chase Nikolai, to retrieve the vaccine before the strike on Raccoon City erased every remaining chance to survive. Carlos nodded and charged after the mercenary, disappearing into the upper levels of the facility. Jill turned back towards the creature. She wouldn't run, not this time. In the center of the chamber, locked behind the reinforced plating, was Umbrella's prototype weapon, labeled only by its code name, Finger, a ferromagnetic infantry use, next-generation railgun. With Nemesis closing in, Jill tore open the compartment and powered up the massive weapon. The machine's coils began to glow, humming with the lethal magnetic force. She fired, the railgun's blast slamming into Nemesis with catastrophic force, tearing huge chunks of matter from its bulk. The creature shrieked, pulling itself forward in one last attempt to reach her, its body regenerating even as it fell apart. Jill didn't wait for another opening. She marched straight towards it, the weapon still crackling with residue energy. With a final surge, she jammed the railgun's barrel into the creature's enormous, gaping maw. The KOs reached full charge, and she fired one last shot. The blast tore Nemesis apart from the inside out. The creature's body ruptured in a violent explosion of flesh and vapor, scattering what remained across the chamber walls. When the smoke cleared, nothing moved. Nemesis, the restless hunter engineered to kill her, was finally dead. Now Jill had one last mission of her own: catch up to Carlos and stop Nikolai. She climbed the final ladder to the surface and emerged on the hospital's rooftop just as dawn's first gray light crept over the burning city. Carlos lay sprawled near the edge, unconscious but alive. Before she could reach him, a shadow moved behind her. Nikolai. He struck fast, knocking her weapon from her grip and sending it skittering across the concrete. Jill dropped to one knee, a breath torn from her lungs, just in time to see him lift the stolen vaccine with a mocking flourish. For a moment she thought he might hand it over. Instead he tossed it, and as it arced through the air, he calmly raised his pistol and shot it. The glass shattered, and the vaccine burst into a mist of lost salvation. Jill stared at the fragments, disbelief twisting into fury. She demanded to know if he understood what he had just done, if he had the faintest idea what he had condemned the survivors to. Nikolai simply smiled. He explained that he didn't care. His employer wanted Umbrella destroyed, and if that meant wiping Raccoon City from the map, then so be it. All that mattered was the data. He raised his gun to kill her, but Carlos surged to life with a desperate roar, tackling Nikolai from behind. The two crashed to the rooftop's edge, grappling for control. Carlos finally locked his arm around Nikolai's throat, dragging him into a chokehold and shouting at Jill to take the shot. She hesitated. The angle was terrible. One wrong move could tear Carlos apart instead of Nikolai. But Carlos' strength began to fail. Jill steadied her breath, aimed and fired. The bullet tore through Nikolai's shoulder, breaking his grip and sending him sprawling to the ground. Carlos collapsed backward, winded but alive. Jill rushed to his side, helping him sit up as he managed a strained, half smile. Jill turned to the wounded mercenary. She demanded to know why he had destroyed the vaccine, when he could have sold it, used it, or done anything else with it. Nikolai's answer was a tangle of cryptic hints, half-truths, and veiled threats. When she demanded to know who he was working for, he offered nothing. Only promises of payment or information if she would drag him out of the city before the missile strike. Jill stared at him for a long moment. Then she halted her weapon. She and Carlos stepped towards a waiting helicopter. Behind her, Nikolai crawled forward, shouting warnings that if he died, she'd never uncover the truth. Jill didn't turn back. The two boarded the helicopter and prepared for takeoff.